In money matters, the JSE is weaker along its global peers as shaky corporate earning reports from tech giants in the United States weighed on sentiment. Zwelakhe Mnguni is Chief Investment Officer at Benguela Global Fund Managers, and he joins us now for a look at money moves. Thank you very much, sir, for your time this afternoon. Let's start with an overview of how the markets are faring so far.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think our market took its cue from the U.S. market yesterday. I think the U.S. market was under a lot of pressure. I think the concerns around what's happening in the Middle East, but also the concern around the impact of interest rates on the global economy continues to bite across the world. And I think, as you said, I mean, the earnings expectations are being moderated down, and I think the market's starting to expect that earnings will slow down quite meaningfully. So South Africa took its cue from that kind of backdrop, and we saw our market coming under pressure. The rand also coming under pressure. The only one area where we saw a bit of strength was in the area of gold mining, and I mean, we also saw clicks coming through. I think those are the two areas where we saw a bit of strength in our market.
Stats SA has published the latest producer price index for September. What do the numbers look like?
Yeah, the numbers look a bit, they've turned in the opposite direction. We've been seeing the numbers, the producer inflation coming down, and it's turned around to now about 5.1 versus I think 4.3 in the previous month. The bottom line is that there is a big impact from food and beverage inflation. There's also paper and printing elements that are driving that inflation, as well as transportation equipment. But broadly speaking, it seems to have turned around in the upward direction again. And I think it is to be expected, given that things are rising, the rand is weaker, and the oil price has stayed relatively strong.
So the World Bank says it will support South Africa's transition to using cleaner forms of energy with a $1 billion loan, rather. Is it a loan?
Sometimes I think this is a bad joke, because if you look at the emissions around the world, I mean, the West needs more emissions reduction than we do. And I think this loan is actually a burden that is coming to South Africa. None of that money is going to come to South African manufacturing sector or the labor market. It's basically going to support factories in the West to basically supply solar panels and whatever equipment that is needed to alleviate the pressure. It is indeed a valid point that we have an energy crisis. It is indeed correct that we need to transition away from fossil fuels. But I think the way it's been done currently, it is not in the best interest of South Africa. I think there's going to be a lot of socio-economic impact that is going to come through at this rash transition. So we're taking loans to basically create problems down the line.
Is South Africa the victim here?
We are. I mean, if you look at the history of emissions over the world, there's definitely the Europe and the USA have been the ones that have polluted the world by the widest margin. And we are the ones that are being pushed to rush the transition. I think the transition should be happening in the West. Even if the whole of Africa eliminated their emissions, the US would still be the biggest. I mean, so I think it is a problem. It's just a question of lack of political leadership across all parties in South Africa, not only just the ANC.
That's just it. There's room for pushback, no?
I think that is where the political leadership was needed, to say we need energy justice or the environmental justice, not just the environmental transition. So South Africa needs to actually stand up and say, the reason why we are where we are, our contribution to the historic pollution is very small, and the people who polluted more must actually pay for this. And this should be a grant, not a loan. So if you take, give or take a 10%, that $1 billion loan, it's 20 billion rand roughly, and you take 10% of it, that's 2 billion. What can you do for South Africans for 2 billion? I think this needs to be said. The environmental issues are real, and the environmental issues need to be addressed by everybody in the world. But the people who polluted the world more in the past need to do a lot more, and actually they need to be subsidized in this whole transition.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's take a look at clicks. Their results for the year ended 31 August 2023 are out. How have they performed in the period under review?
They did very well. I mean, given the kind of environment we are in, I think their revenues were up by about 8%. I think the retail business did quite well. I think the revenue was around 12% there, and the distribution business was a bit under pressure. I think they were only up 1.5%. But having said that, I mean, they managed to get about 11.5% increase in earnings, and their cash flow generation was up strongly. I think almost double their cash generated from operations. So quite a good set of results. They seem to be gaining market share around their respective markets. So a very positive result, and I think the market liked those numbers. The stock is up, I think, just under 5%.
Okay. Meta has reported better than expected results for the third quarter as revenue increased 23%. Help us make sense of the numbers.
Yeah, the numbers were quite impressive. I mean, I think they were better than what the market was expecting. I think the revenue was up about 23%. And amongst those things, what we saw is that the number of users, whether daily or monthly, we saw an increase of about 7% in those numbers. We also saw that their ad impressions increased by about 31%. The price on those impressions also increased. So overall, they were able to get about 23% growth in revenue. And at the bottom line, their cost reduction initiatives that they undertook last year have actually come through, and they were able to increase their earnings by about 168%. So the numbers were very good, and the market really took to heart the positive performance in a very challenging environment.
Chief Investment Officer at Benguela Global Fund Managers, Zwelakhe Mnguni, thank you very much, sir, for your time this afternoon.